you're named after Stanislaus Zbyszko, a wrestler from the 20s. You are trained by Bruno Sammartino, of course. Where did you first meet Bruno? And also, how did Bruno have the time to train anybody at the time? Was this during when Pedro was the champion and he was like semi-retired?
No, I think Bruno was still the champion, but here's what happened. I mean, I was a big Bruno fan, living in Pittsburgh. Bruno was my hero. And when I was 16 and got my driver's license and my $300 piece of crap car, my first car, I found out Bruno lived a couple miles from my house. If I drove down a certain road, I'd go out of my way a little bit to see if I could see him. And one day I saw Bruno through his big hedges. He had these big hedges around the backyard. I could see him for a second standing by his pool getting a tan, and I couldn't help it. I stopped my car, crawled through the hedges, and he looked at me like, oh, here comes a fan, and shook his hand, was very respectful. But the reason I had time to spend with him, because in those days when I met him, Bruno was probably in his 40s. And he was so busy, for years, every day on the road in other countries, Japan, Australia. And this was a time when he was still the champion, I believe, but he only worked on the weekends. He'd only wrestle at the big clubs. He wouldn't do high school shows in Massachusetts or New York or Pennsylvania, but he'd do all the big shows on the weekend, the Spectrum, the Garden, the Boston Garden, Pittsburgh Civic Arena. So he only, was wrestling maybe twice a week at that period in his career. So it just worked out where he had a lot of extra time and we'd work out together. And damn, I went from like 180 some pounds to 245 pounds after a year and a half of doing the Bruno workout, which was heavy weight, low reps, heavy wide grips with the bench, which gave you the chest muscles, and stuff. And I remember my biggest, when I weighed 245 and just started at 21 years old, my bench press record was 465 and a half pounds with the 1 second pause. And back then no one heard of steroids yet. I mean, it was real.
Explain the 1 second pause. So did you actually balance, like put it on your chest? Do you hover it above your chest for 1 second?
Well, no, you'd bring it down and it would stop on your chest for 1 second and then you'd push it off. So what it stopped was bringing it down and bouncing it off your chest to give you help. You touched your chest for 1 second. That meant you're not getting any help. You got to get it off.
Did you ever get involved with the squats and deadlifts and that kind of thing, or were you trying to save your knees at that point?
No, not too much with the length. We do a little running after the workout, but it's really an upper body business, because when you did interviews or work, guys had legs. If some guy had skinny legs, they'd wear, long tights. But it was really an upper body business because people saw that Bruno look, the big chest, the big arms, the big traps. And when you did interviews, you basically saw them from the tights up. So you never really stared or thought about someone's legs. And like I said, if someone had skinny legs, they'd wear tights.
I'm wondering if like the Moondogs must have had skinny legs or something. You wore jeans or 3 pairs of jeans.
They wore jeans or something different. Yeah, but it was really an upper body business to be impressive where they looked at you and went, oh my God. I mean,
Did Bruno have the talk with you about how long did it take for you, from shaking Bruno's hand for the first time to starting training with him? Did you have the talk about how pro wrestling worked?
Well, it was a while because I was very respectful and I was an amateur wrestler. And deep down inside of me, and even with the fans back then, I mean, even the fans that would believe it, and when Bruno got blood and fell on the mat, people would get heart attacks. So I was very respectful and never really brought anything up in terms of, well, how do you guys put this together? I mean, I would never say anything like that. So I was very respectful to Bruno and the business. And over time, I let him be the one to decide when I should know stuff and that. Because it was a very secretive business in the old days. I mean, most of the guys on TV now, I see 180 pounds, 190 pounds. They wouldn't have gotten the door.
What was the minimum at
Forget
the
it.
time? Was it like 246.1 or something like that for the
Well, it's kind of
WWF?
dependent on how you look, but because Bruno was 265, his opponents, Ivan Koloff 300, Professor Tanaka 300, Killer Kowalski 6'6", 280, George Steele 300 pounds. So all the big bad guys were big guys. And Bruno was a big guy, so you really needed a bigger opponent, like a 300-pound George Steele or something, because that sparked what's natural for humanity, where you root for the underdog.
Mm.
Now it's to the point where it doesn't matter if you're 220 or 180, as long as you can backflip off the top turnbuckle and crash into somebody waiting there with their arms out to catch you, you're okay.
I know. The bravery is really the person catching, I think.
Yeah, really, move out of the way, dummy.
So we're going to get on the Bruno feud. How could we not? So you begin as the apprentice of Bruno Sammartino on screen as well as off, and then you challenge him to a match. You don't get the better of him legally, or you sort of, I suppose technically you do in a sense, because you sort of like knee him in the old breadbasket while he's holding the ropes open for you.
Well, that was cheating. Yeah, he held the ropes to be nice, and then I cheated.
And then you throw the referee out, and then you hit him with the wooden chair. I actually watched it just before we started chatting, and I thought, man, a wooden chair as well at the time. That's dicing with concussions, a wooden chair. It's hard to sort of make it look good and not hurt too bad. Is there a trick to it?
No, you know what? I mean, I'd never practiced that. Back in the old days, it was rare that you'd hit someone with a chair. I mean, like nowadays, there's chairs and kendo sticks and tables. I mean, whatever you need is under the ring. Just look under the ring and pull out a bazooka or a table or a kendo stick or a sword, whatever. But back in those days, it was rare. So, I mean, no one practiced it. I just tried to make it look as good as I could without hurting them. But it had to look good. You wanted it to look good. And it was weird because after that match, normally there'd be a riot, but it was so, even Vince said it was the feud no one saw coming. But people were in shock. I mean, when I walked out of the ring and Bruno laying there in a pile of blood, there was no one yelling boos or screaming. They were all sitting there with their mouths open like, what? I mean, they were in complete shock. A few days later, when the TV showed, because this was in Hamburg for TV, a few days later after the TV showed is when I started realizing, oh my God, I drove my car to a town. I came out, my car was smashed. Windows, mirrors hanging, lights smashed, key gouges. Yeah, I mean, it worked. People hated me.
Did you watch it back? Because when I saw it, obviously no one will have really realised, but I did actually notice Bruno do the cut and then put it in his trunks, and that made it onto TV. Did you ever see that and watch that back?
You know what? To be honest with you, I may have seen that once, and I'd always thought to myself, well, that's a stupid camera angle. But yeah, it looked like something, but
unless you knew what you were looking for, how could you ever put two and two together in that sense, I guess?
Yeah, but that's one of these buried secrets that I can never talk about.
No, that's fine.
Sealed in the secret documents next to my Corvette. So.
I shall swiftly move on then to some fan questions. Halsey has asked, was it scary to have so many fans suddenly angry at you after your iconic turn on Sammartino? And I'll add this, were you prepared for the vitriol?
Well, the first few days caught me off guard. Like I said, I pulled up and my car was smashed. I walked out of Albany one time and there's someone shot at me. I mean, boom, this big boom goes off like a shotgun hit the top of the door and the bricks. Like I feel little brick pieces hitting me in the head. And I started realizing, oh my God. I mean, it got so much heat, more than I could even, thought was going to happen. And then right after that, I started hiding, and I'd meet somebody somewhere down the road, but I would hide in a trunk. and be driven into the arena and then get out of the trunk before the show started. And then, I mean, that's when I started carrying a gun, because one time I was going down the highway, and I'm going down the highway in the daytime. I'm driving from New Haven to somewhere in Massachusetts. And all of a sudden, a car's next to me, kind of a beat up big car, and there was like 5 guys in it. One guy was hanging out the back window, waving a big knife, and the car was trying to, like, move over into me to push me off the road. And I kept on going, "What the hell?" And they're yelling something. So I reached under the seat and pulled out the 45 and went boom. And I shot it over their hood because I didn't want to hurt anybody, but I figured that scared them. And the 45 over the hood, boom, they took off and left me alone. But then, I wised up quick. Like I said, I had to sneak into buildings, get there early, hide in trunks. It was an interesting experience.
During any of these times where you're getting shot at or trying to get run off the road or getting stabbed, did you ever think to yourself, job well done, and actually take it as a compliment, or were you just fearing for your life?
I did. I mean, I didn't realize it got over so much more than I even thought it would, because I was still kind of a young guy, but it really got over more than I thought it would. But it wised me up quick to, some things. And 1980, and then probably a good couple of years of that. But that's when everybody would chant, "Larry sucks, Larry sucks." So I could, do what they call stalling, but it wasn't stalling. People really meant it. I sucked. And then in the mid-'80s, it started to change. You had to start getting a different, younger, new audience, and you had the dirt sheets out. Some people were saying, "Well, wait a minute, I don't know, is all this on the level? What's going on?" Things just started to change. But I was still like the only guy left that the people would still, "Larry sucks," because I had them believing that in real life, forget the wrestling, whatever you thought about wrestling, it didn't matter.
Well, they believed in Bruno. So therefore, they believed in you.
They believed in Bruno, and they believed I was a real a-hole in real life. And that was the secret.
Now, this is
so they could do this. You could do "Boo on me."
Do you know, because you've shown the T-shirt, I'm going to skip a question and go, Sunview, what's the backstory behind Larry recording the song "Boo on Me" in 1980? It's a great song.
Oh, God, someone knew that?
Oh, yeah.
But you know what? 1980, that's when everybody hated my guts. And I knew some guys, a couple of young guys that were starting a little sound studio in their basement. So I wrote and sung this song and I called it "Boo on Me." And I did it in one take, sung it in one take. And it was just a spur of the moment thing. And the guys, put some music. I told them, I said, "Well, put some of this music in," because I didn't know anything about music. So some of the guys made up some music, and we put together this record, which wasn't bad, "Boo on Me." And then it was on YouTube. I don't know how it got on YouTube. It's been on YouTube forever. I didn't put it on. But the interesting thing that now I got this shirt because a guy at Pro Wrestling Tees, company that makes shirts, was a fan. But we made a movie at the end of 2019, right before the COVID crap, called The Unbreakable Bunch. And the director heard the song "Boo on Me" and was going to use it at the end of the movie when the credits were going up. And then there's one line in the movie where I'm shooting some aliens and going, "Boo on me, you parasite." So one of the guys from Pro Wrestling Tees sent me this shirt, bright yellow with the big "Boo on Me," which I figured would be good for protests nowadays.
There are so many
protesting.
Of them.
Yeah, you don't like what I'm protesting? Here, "Boo on me." But
was there any records sold? Did anyone actually sell any?
Well, I never had any records to sell. Back in 1980, there was no such thing as merchandising. There was no action figures yet. There was, nothing like that. So nothing really happened with it. I had some 45s made, and sold a few 45s, which over the years I've autographed, but they're extremely rare. It's got a big hole in the middle of the 45 record. But I never really, I mean, when I think back over the years when I was wrestling, I could have, when the music started, I could have used it for my entrance music. Boo, I mean, but duh, stupid. I never, never used it.
I'll give you a couple more Brunos and then we're going to play a little game. So, where was I before? Yes, Christy Show Live has written in and said, what was your favourite match with Bruno? And then I'm going to add in, how many matches did you actually have with Bruno?
Well, the exact number, I don't know, but it was a program. I mean, I think we had maybe 2 matches or so at Madison Square Garden, which led to me running out of the last match, and that's what led to the cage match. So I couldn't run away. That was the build-up. The cage matches were pretty rare back then. But that's what led to the cage match, was me running away from Bruno in the garden. But now I'm in a cage at Shea, and I couldn't run away. But we wrestled, 2 or 3 times in Pittsburgh, 2 or 3 times in Philadelphia. We had a classic match in the Philadelphia Spectrum one time when I went to hit him with a chair again. He ducked, but the chair hit the rope, came back, and I basically knocked myself out. But it was like 2 or 3 times in each big club, like a program. And then it ended with the biggie cage match at Shea Stadium.
Spider Sense has said, please ask Larry about International Wrestling, the small promotion that Bruno was involved in that he worked after his WWF run.
Yeah, if I remember, I mean, just a little bit, I think Dominic DeNucci was involved with somebody, and they tried to start a promotion out of New Jersey, maybe, that area. I can't remember the other guy's name because I was in other territories, and I did some shots for that group, but it didn't last long. I think it was, like Dominic trying to start up a group or something with somebody, and Bruno helping him. I think he was doing the commentating for him, something like that.
Did you ever wrestle for Bruno in his Pittsburgh territory, or had that already closed up by the time you got in the business?
Well, you know what? Bruno owned Pittsburgh for a while, and that's when I started. And actually, there was one of the Mongols, Guido Mongo, I think, bought it from Bruno, the Pittsburgh little territory, which was not the WWF or anything, but it was just Pittsburgh and the towns around Pittsburgh, Altoona and Johnstown or whatever. It was a small thing, but I don't think Bruno messed with it. I don't think he messed with it that long. It got engulfed with the WWF territory, which kind of ended around Pittsburgh, that far west of New York.
Back in the day when you were a kid, were you a fan of the Batman?
Oh, the Batman?
Yeah. Who was it? Tony Marino or something, was it?
Yeah, Tony Marino was his name. To be honest with you, I was such a big Bruno fan. And it was nothing against the Batman, but I don't remember ever going, oh, wow, Batman, yeah, maybe I should wear a cape and do something. I mean, it just never dawned on me. I was into the believable, real life character like Bruno was, other guys.
Now, because I'm bringing up the Pittsburgh territory, I used to do a podcast with Don Morocco, and he always had the idea that Bruno had fallen out with Vince McMahon originally because there was some issue where they were arguing over the Pittsburgh territory or issues between them over that. Did you have any idea of this? Or something?
I really don't know. I mean, I wasn't involved in any business end, but at my young stage of the game. So I really don't know what was going on. But like I said, eventually Pittsburgh became part of the WWF. So I'm sure Bruno and Vince worked something out.